Yo, YouTube, what's going on? It's your boy, Salvation's Elite, and guys, what in the world? Oh my word, this weekend was absolutely nuts. Obviously, it was the beginning of the playoffs, the beginning of Call of Duty Champs for Modern Warfare, and there was drama across the whole weekend, literally from the start to the finish. Absolutely wild the whole way through, and I could not be more excited to talk about it. Let's get right into it. But real quick before we get into it, I want to talk to you about Midnight, the best esports betting website out there. You can level up your esports betting with Midnight and get closer to the communities that you love. They've got customizable odds, outright odds, a lot of different ways to bet, and you can play the way you want to play, and it's really easy. Right now they're doing a promotion. If you bet 20 pounds, you get 5 free, and on the 5th time you'll get an extra 10. So they definitely are looking out for you, and they've been awesome to work with on my end. And so I would really appreciate it if you go use the code Salvation down in the description below. Go check out Midnight. Put in some awesome bets for this weekend. It's just a great way to enjoy competitive Call of Duty and esports even more. So go check out Midnight. So where do we begin? Because like legitimately, we could start with any team talking about any of these crazy storylines, and it would be probably a pretty good place to start. But how about we just start from the beginning of the tournament and talk about the first 2 teams that were eliminated at the tournament? Is there really a better place to start than with Octane and the Seattle Surge? So going into the tournament, I put my foot down and I was like, all right, Seattle is going to win some maps. The veterans on this team with Octane, Slacked, Apathy, they're going to lead the young guys in Proto and Pander, and they're going to make something happen, improve, kind of grind, and make it happen this weekend, and they didn't. First map, they got absolutely smoked, 250 to 110 on Gunrunner. And then at that point, I was already worried because then you're going to probably lose the S&D because it's Seattle. They don't win S&Ds. Then they lost 6-4 on Arklov S&D and they lost like a Hackney Dom. Got 3-0'd immediately out of the tournament. Paris secured themselves 100K moving on to the second round, and Seattle went home empty-handed. I mean, moving into the offseason, we're going to be talking, I'm sure, a lot about Seattle and what happens with this roster and with the organization as a whole. What happens with Octane? Does he stay? Does he leave? Does he try to build his squad in Seattle or try to go somewhere else? It's hard to say, and there's a lot of questions moving in, but Seattle was incredibly disappointing in CoD Champs, and let's be honest, it's either them or LAG as the worst team in Call of Duty. So speaking of LAG, we had a battle between the 2 Los Angeles teams in the first round. On the second match of the tournament, that was between LA OpTic and LA Gorillas. As many of you probably already know, the drama went down there in that tournament with disconnects twice from Kenny. So Kenny disconnected in the first hard point, and then he disconnected in map 4 in the second hard point. He was saying he was getting DDoS, which, you know, kind of makes sense. It was getting played live and he was getting knocked offline, couldn't connect. Those DDoSes ended up making him fly to Dallas and force the CoD League to pre-record the matches so that the low-life DDoSers wouldn't know when to DDoS. So that was just insanely obnoxious. So long story, really long. The series was actually really close. It went game 5. There was a really close map 2 S&D. There was a really close map 3 domination, but OpTic took both of those, put them up 2-1, going into the disconnect in map 4, making it 2-2, and then going into game 5. And what happened was absolutely nuts. Kenny could not connect. He was completely knocked offline. So Dashy, the man himself, had to step in and play in a Piccadilly game 5 S&D, which was absolutely insane. Dashy and company sent the Los Angeles Gorillas home in just crazy fashion. Check out this clip.
Dashy, I mean, what more do you want? He's 6-6.
Yep.
Great, right? Great. That's an unreal stat line for somebody coming in and filling in a map 5 like this. Cold not playing in the rest of the series. But what a job he is doing. But Hollow is the guy. Hollow is 12-7 as Dashy hits the snipe, though. That's a first blood. And will that be the first domino to close out one of the weirder best of 5s we've ever commentated?
And Vivid, I mean, he is just taking fight after fight. Talk about confidence. 11 kills in this game. But there's Dashy, hits another one. Challenge me again, sir. I got a new angle.
He's hitting the snipes. He's going massive as a substitute in this map 5. Now Draza, he gets so much information there. Gets so much information. Now gonna reposition top. Did he catch him off a bomb? No, it's Dashy hitting another snipe as he's got 3 in the round, 5 in a row. Dead silence out as he's feeling himself. They can close it out here. Slasher peeks the edge. It's all to Saints. Saints last man up. He's been spotted. Draza and TJ have got to get the trade, and there it is.
Wild stuff there from OpTic, which we'll talk more about in a second. But basically, LAG, I mean, they played OpTic closer than what Seattle played Paris. And so realistically, I would imagine Seattle is the worst team in the Call of Duty League, which is really tough pill to swallow. with some of the guys that are on that roster. But overall, LAG didn't really show that much. You kind of hoped that they would be able to push OpTic to the brink in S&D, which it was definitely close. And then we really didn't even get to watch any of the hard points, so we really don't know what would have happened in those situations. But you would have had to expect that OpTic would be in a pretty good spot in this series. Otherwise, likely would have been a 3-0 if Kenny didn't disconnect. So heading into roster mania, I'd imagine this LAG squad is going to be completely split apart, and it's really hard to say which players will stay on the squad and which ones won't. Realistically, you'd expect like the core of like potentially Decimate, Blast, and Vivid to stay around, but it kind of all depends on how their relationships work out. But we'll definitely talk a lot more about that in the upcoming few weeks for sure. But to continue with the disconnect things, let's talk about London and Toronto. So that was kind of the next matchup. So London was down 2-1 in this Hackney domination. It was a really tight game and 0 disconnected, no replay. They lost, get knocked down the losers 3-1, which was really, really controversial. You know, later in the video, we'll talk more about both these teams considering what ends up going down. But that was a massive controversy early in the tournament with the disconnect and how that played out. Toronto looked really, really good in a series, but it would have been very possible for London to win that map, force a game 5, and then who knows what happens in Search and Destroy. So that was a massive controversy early as well. So, okay, so now we got to talk about the next team who got eliminated, the Minnesota Rokkr. And in their first game, they played against the New York Subliners in the winner side of things. In that series, New York looked pretty good overall, although their S&D looked surprisingly bad. And that was the one place where the Rokkr, of course, looked good. It was a fairly close match on Ramaza in map 1. Then on map 2 on Arklov, the Rokkr literally dominated. It was like 6-1 and looked amazing. Then Petro, New York dominated, of course, on Dom. And you go into map 4 with one of the craziest hard points in a while. Hackney sometimes creates for these crazy moments on P5 heading into P1. That's happened so many times this year. And so this is what went down.
Manages to make his way into the point, not before being cut down as well. And again, the back and forth we seriously are going here, man. And it's number 6 who's managed to make the run across map, and it's going to be Alex. Alex loses the 1v1 against Zuma, though, on the other side of the map. And Temp's now back onto the point. 25 for the win. And we could actually see it done here. No, the contest comes through there. I was going to say, for Rokkr, there was a chance they weren't going to get it done, but here we go. Zuma has to win big here, on point. His teammates need to get in position. This is to force the game 5. There's the contest. Attach is going to be in position now to get the push. Now there's a few seconds left. Attach with a couple of big kills. 20 now for the win for Subliners. 2 seconds for Rokkr. Get in on the point. Slay these players out. But you absolutely have to get it done here. One more push, Rokkr. This is to keep the series alive. This is for the game 5 and Attach. He's going to keep getting these kills. Chance, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. Subliners, they're holding the line. They're keeping the kills coming, and that's going to be it. It's a 3-1.
Literally just crazy. The Rokkr, of course, turned into choker in chat real quick, and that knocked them down to losers. I wouldn't say this series didn't give me much faith in New York overall in the tournament. They didn't look great against a new roster in Minnesota with Exceed replacing GodRx, which was the massive controversy going into champs with whether or not GodRx deserved to be benched. And I'm sure GodRx is pretty happy with how this tournament ended up going for the Rokkr, considering GodRx still gets the payout for what went down with making winners and everything, but not an ideal situation to say the least for the Minnesota Rokkr. They went down to the losers to play OpTic Gaming. And the fact that OpTic and Minnesota then meet up here and the drama that went down, oh, it was just so foreshadowing, man. Again, if you think back on Twitter, Exceed was talking trash to OpTic after beating them in scrims, you know, when OpTic didn't take a map off of them. Kenny, Slasher, and Draza all shot back at him like, bro, shut up. Like, you haven't even played. You've played 1 series and you're talking trash. Like, get out of here. The second that this match finished, they had their drafts ready. They clicked send and shot right back at Exceed, basically telling him to shut up. You know what I mean? With a few more words thrown in there as well. It was crazy. And the first hardpoint was absolutely insane again. Azhir Cave, OpTic made a huge comeback. And once again, the Rokkr went from the Rokkr to the choker real quick. You know, they were down by like 70 points, ended up getting beat on Cave. That had to have been pretty demoralizing. Then Piccadilly came around. OpTic dominated Piccadilly 6-1. Which made me think that OpTic's S&D might be in really good shape for this weekend, considering that they won the first 2 S&Ds in their first series, then come down here and smoke the Rokkr in their S&D after the Rokkr just smoked New York. So that gave me a thought that OpTic might be in a pretty good spot here to make a run at this tournament. And then on the domination, OpTic handily took it, knocking the Rokkr out of the tournament. Again, the Rokkr, another team where you're going to really be paying attention to what happens to this team during roster mania. Realistically, this whole roster could be exploded depending on what they want to do. Maybe you see the core of like Alex and like Silly, maybe a Sim, but a Sim in that domination at the end had one of the worst maps we've seen all season. He went 9 and 24 on that dom and like had 2 kills through the majority of the map. It was really tough way to end your season if you're a sim. He's been a fast player. He was really good in BO4, and it hasn't necessarily translated all too well in Modern Warfare. Of course, he does a lot of dirty work around the map for his team and definitely helps his team in a lot of situations, but patience and playing patiently in the thick of it has kind of been a problem for a sim season long. I think that's something he'll continue to work on moving in the future. I am excited to see what happens with this Rokkr roster moving forward into Roster Mania. So now let's talk about New York, which, side note, if you want to buy hoodies like this, go down, link in the description, go to esportsclothingco.com. You can check out hoodies like this one and many others for different cities and cool designs. Highly recommend go checking that out as well. But aside from that, after they beat the Rokkr 3-1, they moved on to play the Huntsmen, which of course was going to be a really fun series. The New York fans thought that they could take this thing. I wasn't as confident in them going into this, coming off of that Rokkr win where they looked really bad in S&D, but they came out hot on Ramaza hardpoint and smoked the Huntsmen in map 1, which I think kind of got the Huntsmen fans a little bit worried. But then map 2 was absolutely nuts. Came down to around 11, 6-5 on Arklov Peak. This is what went down.
Point possibly in this round. Who is going to be the difference maker? Smoke tossed out. Temp is there for the plant. Subliners are happy to get this one down exactly when they do, but Temp has to be careful of his positioning. Chicago are just hoping to get him out of the way with nades, and the utility will in fact work out. RCD setting up shop, decides to go for the challenge. Can he take down Mac? And he does. A great reaction as two players fall early for the Subliners. Hold plant position, you can argue it's not ideal. Reason being is Prestini is on the flank, and now it's up to accuracy all by himself. A 1 versus 4. But can he keep it alive? Can he try to get these players off for the defuse? And no, it's not gonna happen. Chicago will clutch up in round 11.
It was definitely wild as the Huntsmen clutched up, and that was some pretty good practice for the Huntsmen when you look forward and what happened later on in this tournament. But as for New York, they lost a really close domination on Gunrunner that could have gone either way multiple times with how the spawns flipped. And then they won the Hackney hardpoint, which means they took both hardpoints off the Huntsmen, sending it into a game 5 on St. Petro, where again, the Huntsmen have been pretty good season long. The Huntsmen shut them down there. 6-2, dominated New York there. And again, New York did not look good in their S&Ds early on this tournament. So that sent New York down to play London in the losers bracket. Loser goes home, and London looked dominant in that first hardpoint on Gunrunner. Then in the S&D, New York rebounded. They beat a pretty good S&D team in London on Arklov 6-4, which they had just lost in round 11. And then they went to domination, and again, London's not good at dom. New York absolutely smoked them in the dom. And again, London pretty handily wins the Ramaza and sends it to a game 5 on Ramaza. And again, if you remember Temp back earlier in the year, he was like, yo, don't play me on Ramaza, no cap. And what's just absolutely ironic about this is that their season ends on back-to-back Ramaza, hardpoint, then S&Ds. They lose both of them. London wiped the floor with them 6-1 in that game 5 S&D. It wasn't even close. London looked like the significantly better team in S&D, especially on Ramaza, and sent New York home. Pretty disappointing weekend overall for New York with the potential that they had. But you look back on this season, they only had one win, and it was on the 9mm meta for that one event where the 9mm meta was a thing. All things considered, as a New York fan, I think the season's gonna feel like a disappointment. Only having the one win on the one event with a new meta. Just looking back at the year, it's gotta be a little bit disappointing overall. Let's talk about the last team that got eliminated outside the top 6, and that was the Florida Mutineers. Since they were a top 4 seed heading into the tournament, they played Toronto in Mutineers' first match of the weekend in the second round, and it was an insanely close series the whole way through. It could have gone either way, like almost every single map, multiple different times. Azhir Cave hardpoint was 250 to 232. Then the Piccadilly S&D was 6-4. Then the domination on Hackney was 161 to 156. And then the St. Petro hardpoint was a 1-point game. And this was the ending. It was absolutely insane.
Havoc is still here, trying desperately to finesse. Have they done enough? The reinforcements should get there, but a little bit quicker on the reinforcements for Ultra. Somebody's got to get the angle to shut that down, and it may have been Skies that was able to do it. Havoc seems to have been alive in this point forever, but it's Skies that continues to find kill after kill. Now sliding out is Havoc. You're still alive if you're Mutineers. You can technically win it here and look towards top blue. You've got Frosty in position to maybe get some cutoffs. He can cut off these reinforcements, but Kleenex is able to drop them. It's all going to come down to these final seconds. If Mutineers can hold and get us to a map 5, Havoc doing what he can through the smoke. Ultra, though, able to get in. Now no one can win it here. No one can win it here. There's not enough time. It's all going to come down to the rotation. Ultra are now in position to close this out. Mutineers have got to rally over. 249, 249, Ultra are in, Ultra do it. They couldn't get it closed out on first, but the rotation enough to win. Woo! What was that hard point?
Dude, that game could have ended like 4 or 5 different times. Just wild with how those spawns came through near the end, and that sent the Mutineers down to the losers bracket. Overall, the Mutineers just don't look like the same team that they were a few weeks ago. There could be a lot of reasons for why that is. Some people speculated it was the spawn glitch. Others just think that the teams figured out what they were trying to do with the multiple AR metas, and it doesn't work as well anymore, and teams caught up with that meta idea. You know, whatever it is, they definitely were not the same team that they were a few weeks ago, a few months ago. And Toronto came up clutch in the respawns when it mattered. You would have never expected Florida to lose 3 respawns to Toronto at any point this year since they added Awakening, but that's exactly what happened in this series. Really disappointing for Florida at the end of the day. So now Florida's got to make their losers run, and they play OpTic for top 6. And dude, they got smoked. To be fair, the respawns were pretty close. They played Azhir Cave, lost 250 to 214. Then they got absolutely fried in Gunrunner S&D. Again, OpTic looked really good in S&D on the weekend. And then they went down to Dom, where you would expect the Mutineers to play their best. And on Hackney Dom, OpTic made like a literally improbable, impossible comeback in the last 30 seconds. I was doing a watch party with shout out twitch.tv/Salvations Elite. I'll be doing watch parties again for this weekend. Kind of follow along with me. It's a good time. We just talk and chill and watch the games. It's really, really fun. I was losing it because I thought for sure it was over. OpTic came back and eliminated the Mutineers. Here's the clip.
Mutineers are getting it done from the seaside hold. They've had that CB setup. What an excellent job holding on, and now with 2.5 left to go. Up 25. You see every 5 seconds. Those added points going to be massive. That'll be 4 down. 4 down. There's one more player bottom, but they're able to pick it up. Slasher's going to get dropped as he soars in. What can Pharaoh do? He's at least able to get one. Delays this for a second. That's enough for the reinforcements now to get into the top window. The TJ, yeah, he gets C as well. B might get captured as well. Kenny's trying to do it. No points coming in currently for Mutineers. 12-point game. Minute to go.
TJ's still alive at C as well. One player inside of B.
He won it again!
TJ, he's gotten 5 in a row. More pressure here.
No.
Another one.
They haven't got B yet, though. They're just starting to get it done. C will be neutral as well, down to a 9-point advantage. Another one for Kenny. TJ then falls up with 2. That's going to be 4 down. Second by second, the lead is dwindling now to 2 points. OpTic can win it with a 3-0 here. TJ wins another. TJ's lighting it up.
They all spawn out. There's just no time to get inside of B, to get inside of A. TJ goes huge at C. You have Slasher staying alive inside of B. Perfect execution towards the end of that game. And OpTic Gaming LA, you have a date with the Chicago Huntsmen.
Like what? Come on, man. That is really, really tough for Florida to end on Hackney, where they've been pretty good this year throughout since they added Awakening. Just a rough way to go out. And I will be really interested to see how this roster plays out heading into Black Ops Cold War, what roster mania means for these guys, especially Awakening, Havoc, and Frosty. Tough news for Havoc, man. This feels a lot like the Gen G outing last year for Havoc as a whole. Incredibly disappointing. Havoc is now 1-10 in his last 11 series at Champs. That is really, 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 really tough. To go back to back like that, it sucks for Havoc and for the Mutineers and for all the Mutineers fans. Not the showing you wanted to see after the potential that they showed earlier on in the year. To decide who would be in the top 6, we had the Huntsmen versus FaZe and the Empire versus Toronto. Those games were trying to punch their ticket to be a top 3 team and secure themselves $600,000. And both matches lived up to the hype. So if you've been listening to my stuff the past, few weeks, you know I have a lot of faith in FaZe going into this tournament, and they came out hot in map 1 against the Huntsmen. FaZe coming out slow in map 1, kind of like the Huntsmen did against the Subliners, because the Subliners had already had matches played going into the Huntsmen match, and the Huntsmen have already had a match played going into the FaZe match, but that was not the case. FaZe looked awesome right out the gate. They won 250-177 on Ramaza, which is a map that the Huntsmen have been pretty willing to play lately. and they looked really, really good. Gave me a lot of confidence in FaZe going into map 2, which was an Arklov S&D. The Huntsmen had to have set the record for the most hype on one map ever in a tournament. They went round 11 on Arklov S&D versus FaZe in map 2. This was the result.
Fence.
Look at the aggression from Chicago. Look at the aggression. This is like applying counter out of the Huntsmen. They have called this correctly. You have Pristini, an envoy working through middle of the broken. It's going to be a fast plant from Atlanta. This could be a very quick round for either side. Pristini with the first blood, now just trying to play his life. I love that play. They're going to regroup for the retake.
He's able to get out with his life, but everyone already here from Huntsman can Priest to get out of this situation with his life. Huntsmen have all grouped up towards the back. They want to bully their way through with the numbers. 35 seconds on the clock. Priest just trying to stay up, not able to do it. He's going to drop now. 3 versus 5 for FaZe, 2 versus 5. Everybody's dropping. The call is there from Huntsman. They all fall. Huntsman clutch up in the round 11 and tie us up 1-1. What a play call in the final round.
Huntsmen clutch up again on Arklov, and once again foreshadowing to what happens later on as well. Holy moly, ridiculous. We head into a dom on Gunrunner. I definitely liked FaZe going into this one, and they came out and made it happen. 167, 150. FaZe was looking really, really good in the respawns. I was worried for the Huntsmen going into this one because Pristini had really been struggling in the series. The slaying power had not been there in the respawns for the Huntsmen, so I was pretty worried about the Huntsmen going into this Petro, that this could end up being a 3-1. But I underestimated the king, man. I made the mistake and underestimated Scumpy. He went off when it mattered the most for the Huntsmen in Petro hardpoint, 30-18, and even though Pristini was really, really struggling, he made up for the slaying power. The Huntsmen handily took the Petro hardpoint, forcing a game 5 on Ramaza S&D, where the Huntsmen haven't been very clutch lately. At the end of the day, it nearly went the distance, but FaZe came out on top 6-4 and looked really, really good. Simp didn't have the best series overall, but AbeZy and Priesta really stepped up when it mattered and slayed out. You know, Priesta's got a lot more comfortable using the M4 now, and I think it made a big difference. That's going to make him really, really dangerous in this upcoming series on a Saturday. That sent Chicago down to the losers. So in the other winner semi, it was Empire versus Toronto. And again, this series did not let us down either. It was wild. Kind of like what we would expect. Empire came out and looked fantastic in the hard points. On Cave map 1, they won 250 to 182. And then on Gunrunner map 4, they won 250 to 107. It was nearly a 100-point club. They were literally frying. But again, Toronto won map 2 and 3. They won 6-4 in the SCDL Petro, which they played really, really, really well. They actually stole the Gunrunner Dom, which I was really surprised about. I thought for sure Empire was going to win that one, and they really surprised me there, which is a lot of improvement from Toronto in that aspect. I mean, recently, the Empire played a lot better in domination, and I thought, you know, based off how that first hardpoint went, they'd be in a good spot to win these respawns, but Toronto really surprised me there and looked great. And again, like I said, Dallas dominated in map 4, made up for the loss in the domination, forcing a game 5 on Piccadilly. And what was so interesting about this matchup is that both these teams have been pretty good on Piccadilly. S&D, you guys see that Cammy versus Illey snipe off, and this time around, man, Illey had ice. Overall, the Empire dominated the S&D 6-2. Everything was going the Empire's way, and they looked really, really, really good to finish off this series against Toronto. At the same time, they announced the MVP of the whole season, which was Shotzzy. And I mean, we're going to talk more about this on the podcast tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. But I think it makes a lot of sense overall. When you talk about most valuable, emphasis on valuable, Shotzzy has a pretty freaking good argument when it comes to the value that he brings to the Empire. The Empire looked like a really, really dangerous team. That FaZe Empire matchup next week is going to be tons of fun. That set up for 2 pretty epic matchups to get inside the top 4, and that was London versus Toronto, which was a grudge match for London after the disconnects in the first round of the tournament. And then we had OpTic versus OpTic. We had the Huntsmen versus OpTic. There was a bunch of really fun storylines with both of these games. So again, in this London-Toronto match, after seeing Zero beat his former team in New York and seeing Constructioni revived, coming back to life, absolutely insane, we got to see them face off against Toronto. Toronto came out looking really, really, really good on a really close Gunrunner hardpoint that could have gone either way, but overall, Toronto clutched up and played very, very well overall. I mean, again, if a few kills go different ways, a few spawns go different ways, that flips on its head, but Toronto made it happen. And I was feeling pretty good about Toronto going into map 2 on the S&D. It was Gunrunner, but London clutched up 6-4, heading into a 3rd straight Gunrunner map, Gunrunner domination, where again, London, who has not been playing well in Dom on the year, figured something out or learned something in their previous matchups and took the Dom, going up 2-1 into a Petro hardpoint. And it just feels like London had something to prove after that original disconnect, because all things on paper, Toronto's been the better team lately. Toronto had been playing better in champs up to that point, but London had them all over the map. They win the S&D, they win the Dom, and they really play great in this Petro hardpoint, punching their ticket into the top 4, which is ironic considering, like, on the podcast we've been talking about it, or in my content later we've been talking about it, and I had lost faith in London. I gave up on them right before the end of the year. They proved me and a lot of people wrong at champs, securing a top 4 finish. And for Toronto, I mean, all things considered on the season, this champs should be a success, but because of the recent success of Toronto, that they had already beat London one time in champs, this comes off as a disappointment that they could have finished top 4. But with this roster, it's really cool to see that, you know, the roster having a full 10 really did work for Toronto in the long run, improving, fine-tuning things, working on things that other teams couldn't work on. It really did work for Toronto throughout the whole season. And so maybe we'll see more teams try something like that in the future, but it was just a crazy series overall. The question is, who's going to play London for top 3 at CoD Champs? That would be the winner of this OpTic versus Huntsmen match. Oh my goodness. So going into this series, man, we all kind of thought this had the potential to be really special. And I mean, it lived up to the expectations. It was literally insane. So the Gunrunner Hardpoint map 1 went down to the wire. There was massive clutches from both teams at multiple different points to turn the tides, but the Huntsmen had the last laugh, 250 to 241 after that map 1 win, that clutch up from the Huntsmen overall in a really hard fought map where Scump didn't play well, and Pristini redeemed himself kind of after his atrocious series against FaZe. He comes out and goes 37 and 31 in this hard point, and covering for Scump in a really bad map for him overall. It was a huge win for the Huntsmen in their confidence in respawns moving into the rest of the series and the rest of the tournament. But OpTic bounced back in the S&D and won 6-4 and won 6-4 on Gunrunner as well. Again, OpTic looked amazing in S&D all tournament long. At that point, after that S&D, they were then 5-0 in S&Ds overall in champs, literally rolling. Heading into the Petro Dom, I think everyone kind of thought, all right, the Huntsmen, they lost the S&D. OpTic's been on fire in S&D. They're going to bounce back, no problem. St. Petro Dom is going to be good. That was not the case. OpTic really took control in the second half and made a pretty big statement, really frying in that back half of the game. 150 to 133 heading into the hard point where they can put away the Huntsmen and clinch their ticket for top 4. And in this hard point again on Ramaza map 4, Pristini went huge, 33 and 24. Again, working on his redemption story after the original absolute tragedy in the FaZe match, which I didn't even mention in the FaZe match. In the S&Ds, he really struggled. He was 1-4 in the game 2 S&Ds for first blood and 0-3 in the game 5 for first blood. So he was going down early in the rounds way too often. And that was something that he was definitely looking to fix going into this final series against OpTic. And now going into a map 5 S&D Arklov for top 4 at CoD Champs. And this map was absolutely crazy. Okay, like there's no really explaining it. You should just go back and watch the whole map, because it was back and forth, round win, round win, round win, round win. Both teams were going back and forth at it. This seemed destined for round 11, and that's exactly what went down. I mean, I have to show you this one. Let's get right into it.
One of the things they like to do early in the year was that mid-map pressure behind smokes, try to get into the second story of the B house. Pristini spots him, but Pristini gets smoked. He just gets evaporated. That's the first blood for OpTic. Now what can you do behind it? The utility coming in over the top, it's not going to connect. The opening in the defense is there for OpTic. Set up behind the bar.
They're all here. All of Chicago's here. They're all inside.
They're here on the
bar.
cross. There's the first kill from Scump. That's going to be bombed down. The peek comes in from Hollow. What a gunfight win that is. It's madness inside of the B house. Scump just trying to finesse, trying to get the kill. Envoy going to peek from outside. The challenge is going to come in. Scump's got to reload. No one can finish the kill. Arsees picks up 2. It's all going to be on TJ now. 1v1, and Huntsmen win it. Envoy gets the kill in the 1v1, and they move on. It's madness.
Wow, dude. What in the world, man? The Huntsmen, I mean, that's about as reminiscent of BO3 champs as it can be, but this time in reverse. Like with how it goes down from like a 2v2 to a 2v1, and it's, you know, it's formal, and now this time it's Envoy, and like there's just so many like parallels here. It's weird. Very poetically, the last time this happened, they lost in champs on their way there. This time they win it to punch their ticket into the top 4 with a matchup against the London Royal Ravens on Saturday to play the loser of the Empire versus FaZe match. So as for OpTic, I mean, this was a huge overall performance for them. I mean, Slasher on Twitter said, you know, this is a surprise probably to hear for you guys, but I'm really content with our performance at Champs overall. And like, you know, for a competitor like Slasher, that's saying something. But again, Kenny flew down to Texas after their original loss, but Kenny flew down to Texas to make it happen. Texas Kenny was crazy, and Kenny looked like a whole different player. OpTic, again, Slasher was in Texas. You know, all of them except for Tej were in Texas for this game, and it mattered. They were playing at the Complexity headquarters. They look like a whole different team. And so for those of you who are trying to prove that this whole online season has been a complete hoax, I mean, the LA teams is kind of the only, in my opinion, that's the only teams that actually have an excuse for online connection because of where these servers lie. Slasher has legitimate arguments for why it's really unfair this season for connection for LA teams. So for anyone who is in LA for the majority of this year, I would say that you do have a reason to complain with a potential asterisk next to your name for this season. But for other teams, for the most part, the connections have been pretty fair throughout the year. And if you look at what teams are successful, it's the teams that were successful on LAN at the end of the year. There are arguments both sides, but OpTic, for them specifically, looked like a whole different team on LAN and looked like a top 4 or 5 team overall in Call of Duty playing from Texas. So my word, this was a long video, but there was so much to talk about, and we're going to talk about even more of it tomorrow. And we're going to do predictions for the weekend games, the top 4 on the podcast tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. We got to break down the MVP and how this impacts roster mania, the finishes from these teams. Oh my word. There is so much to unpack, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, like, comment, subscribe. I really do appreciate all the support. I'm trying to do this full time, and I cannot do that without you guys. So again, shout out Midnight. Go support them. Links down in the description. Check out esportsclothingco.com. If you want to find out hoodies like this, check that link's in the description as well. So shout out to all of you guys. Twitch.tv/Salvations Elite for all the live streams, for the watch parties. It's a blast around here, man. But as always, guys, I'm your boy Salvations Elite, and we will see you next time. I'm out.